Morning everybody. Sorry, having trouble with my phone this morning. So today we're going to do this week's midweek thought for the day. So yes, camera's moved. You can see the mess on my mantelpiece now. I need to tidy that up. So today we're going to start looking at a Bible story which you may not ever have heard of, and I'm going to read a bit from the Bible and talk about the people in the story and compare them to David and Goliath. So you need to know that Sisera is the general of the Canaanites. They are holding the Israelites kind of hostage. They're conquering them. Barak is the Israelite leader, and Deborah. This isn't actually a story about Deborah. Deborah is the judge of Israel at the moment. She's the person that they go to for judgment. So we're going to start in Judges 4. It's about halfway through Judges 4. When Sisera was told that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera called out all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the troops were with him from Harosheth Hagoim to the Wadi Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Up! For this is the day on which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. The Lord is indeed going out before you." So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 warriors following him, and the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and all his army into a panic before Barak. Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot, while Barak pursued the chariots and the army to Harosheth Hagoim. All the army of Sisera fell by the sword, and no one was left. So Sisera is the general, and he's running away. Now Sisera had fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between the king Jabin of Hazor and the clan of Heber the Kenite. And Jael came out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, have no fear." So he turned aside to her in the tent, and she covered him with a rug. Then he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. He said to her, "Stand at the entrance of the tent, and if anybody comes and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' say, 'No.'" But Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple until it went into the ground. He was lying fast asleep from weariness, and he died. Then as Barak came in pursuit of Sisera, Jael went out to meet him and said, "Come, I will show you the man whom you are seeking." So he went into her tent, and there was Sisera lying dead, and the tent peg in his temple. So on that day, God subdued King Jabin of Canaan before the Israelites. Then the hand of the Israelites bore harder and harder on King Jabin of Canaan until they destroyed King Jabin of Canaan. So Jael is a married woman. I have no idea how old that means that she was. And she is very vulnerable. She's alone in her tent. She probably had servants with her. We're not quite sure. They don't appear in the story at all. Maybe she was there by herself. And she entices in some way Sisera to come into the tent. However, it's really hot and he's really exhausted, so she just says, "Come in." And technically they were at peace, although Jael obviously was about to show her true colours as an Israelite. And she waits until he's asleep, and she kills him with a tent peg, which is handy, I guess, and effective. I mean, if you're going to kill somebody with something very quickly, tent peg through the temples is going to be the way to do it. She probably was pretty good, handy with a tent, so you should really watch all female scouts, I suppose, is what I'm saying. No, but she did what she really needed to do as part of this war, and yet we don't ever write any books about her. We don't have a record of her. A lot of people don't even really know that she's part of the story, part of this whole story of this time. It's interesting that Deborah says that Sisera will be placed into the hands of Barak. So Barak and his army kill a lot of people, but he leaves it up to this lonely woman in a tent to kill their leader. And she does. It's quite a violent story. I think that's why people don't like to talk about it very much. And it's quite a difficult story, and it has been interpreted by men in very many different ways about exactly how Jael actually enticed him into the tent. Apparently it's not clear what she was promising him. I'm not a Hebrew scholar. I have no idea about that. But I know that Jael was a very vulnerable and very, very brave lady who took quite a violent action to protect herself and her country, and to finish off a job which the army hadn't been able to do. But I'm still in this position of thinking, why don't we have a storybook about this? I've got a storybook here. This is my David and Goliath storybook. So this tells the story of David, little boy, very vulnerable like a woman on his own, up to a point. I mean, David had all the rest of the army all around him, effectively. And it talks about David killing Goliath. It's not less violent, is it? But we make a storybook out of this. We do censor this storybook in some ways. So it's got lovely pictures, actually. It's it's a lovely storybook. Yeah, it's got all sorts of things in it, all sorts of lovely pictures. And then we get to the end, and then this is the picture at the end, and that's this is Goliath lying, looking very peacefully dead. More peacefully dead than he would be if he had a tent peg through his temple. That's true. He would be more peaceful than that. But it's not true, because that's not exactly what David did. If you go back to 1 Samuel and have a look at what David did. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Ta-da! Yep, that is what happened. Striking down the Philistine and killing him. So there was no sword in David's hand. No, because he was a little boy and the sword was too heavy for him. That was the story that we're told. And the armour was, to be fair, too big. Then David, he stood over Goliath, the Philistine. He grasped Goliath's sword, drew it out of its sheath and killed him. And he cut his head off with it. His head's still there in the picture. So David, little boy, does this really violent act. But he's made a saviour. He will go on to do other things. I have very many opinions on some of the other things which David did. And David went on to be other things, do other things and to be the king. And we make his story more acceptable for children, and we put it in a little pretty picture book. And we read it to them and tell them this is the story of your faith. This is part of God's story. And Jael, stuck. Brave woman who did something very violent, but saved the nation in the same way that David saved the nation. Very similar, at sort of very similar outcomes. But there's no storybooks about Jael. I mean, even if we've made it prettier, Goliath's death prettier, for the storybooks, then maybe we should be making Sisera's death more acceptable. Maybe we should be making both of them as unacceptable as each other. I've always liked the story of Jael. I think it's to do with my family background. I think because I was on my own with my mum from when I was 10, living just the two of us most of the time. We did a lot of things that people didn't think that we could do or should do. My mum always taught me that should just be able to do it. Also, because I'm only 5 foot tall, I know a lot about tool use. Because I have to move the chair, or I have to reach something down with something, or I have to go and do something else, or I have to do things in different chunks because physically I can't manage them. Jael did what she could do, and she was very brave. and she saved the nation from this general. And I just really admire her. Now, some of you may now be worried and never want to come near me if I've got a mallet and a tent peg in my hand. I'm really, actually, my family would say I'm quite wild with a mallet, so it might be safer not to come near me if I have a mallet. But I want to say, where's her story? If David got a storybook for killing Goliath, then where's Jael's storybook for killing Sisera when she was in a much more vulnerable and isolated place than David was at the time? I don't normally do radical feminist theology, but yeah, I just kind of think that we need to have a think about some of these women at the moment. I'd like to point out as well, and these books are really beautiful books, but this series does have down here, it has a Moses in the bulrushes, not Miriam's great adventure saving her brother. Just something for us to think about. So if you want to find out a bit more about the story of Jael and where that fits, it's in 1 Samuel 17, and having a look through bits of 1 Samuel, quite interesting to see which bits of history we choose to talk about and which bits of history we choose to forget. So thank you all for watching. There'll be some other women in the series, and I'll see you all soon. Okay, bye.